Hello, so this video will cover basically how to get Custom Robo Tournament Edition 3 up and running, and then being able to play Netplay, as well just generally covering Dolphin Netplay, a bunch of sorted places like that. So if you have any other particular want, like to play vanilla or anything else, this guide should still hopefully apply to you, and I'll break it up into each section based on what everything is about, so you can probably look through the sidebar and see which sections are relevant to what you're doing. But taking it from the top, first I'm going to talk about what you actually need to download and have beforehand in order to do all of this. Now, firstly and most obviously, you need an ISO of the custom Robo game. Specifically the US version. I don't believe the patching will work on any other version. Sorry about that if you need to dump a different version. But yeah, I am not at liberty to say anything related to that, but I would highly recommend, in terms of legal methods, using clean rip, and preferably you need the homebrew channel on your Wii. If you have a Wii available, that's probably the best possible way to get a good rip of your game onto an ISO. But once you have that, other than that, you're going to need XDelta UI. Now, a Google search will find it, but naturally, I'll put this in the description as well. But you can see it right here, and quick little screenshot of what it should look like by the time you download it. It'll come with a number of things. XDelta UI is the executable you're looking for that'll look like this, if you just want to verify. And also, a specific version of Dolphin that's used in the Netplay Discord right now is 5.0 15445. I'd highly recommend downloading this because you're not really going to persuade anyone to swap to a different version. And this is just kind of our default for stability purposes because newer versions can sometimes have their own weird issues. This may change in the future. If it is, I'll make a note of it in the description, and you'll probably be able to find that kind of information on our Discord somewhere. Regardless, this is the version that we use for right now and the foreseeable future, and I don't think that'll change for a very, very long time. So download it. It's not too much of a hassle to set up, just as long as you have all your stuff from, per se, a different Dolphin version somewhere. You can just set the paths for this one to those same folders. Everything should work out fine. Now, lastly, on the Discord itself, scroll down here. So you can see the setup channel right here. This should have both a written guide, XDelta tutorial, all of this other stuff. Some of it is kind of superfluous with this video, but it is what it is, and it's just a useful extra to this. But specifically, you'll want to keep this unified code in mind. You don't need anything from it for right now, but it's very important. And specifically, there will be links here from about when this video goes up onwards that link down to the modding content channel here, where in the pinned messages, you can find both the texture pack and the XDelta, the most recent one of these. So these two are for people who have already basically patched to some degree and played previous versions of the game. You don't need to pay any mind to them. Their titles basically reflect what version you're going from, which is like the T 2.2.2 to T3, which is the newer version. So naturally, if you're a beginner, like new to all of this, vanilla to T3 is exactly what you want to download. And then once you've got that, you should have basically everything you need immediately. So I will move on to the next part now. So now, once you've acquired everything you need beforehand, I'll show you how to actually patch the ISO into the modded version. So firstly, you'll need to actually extract that XDelta somewhere. This should be what you see once you have all of it taken down. Specifically, double click on the UI, and then something like this should show up, as I showed off previously on their webpage. So you're going to need to get two things and make a third with this. Don't worry about the create patch tab. It's completely unnecessary for the purposes of actually applying them, and it's mostly just used by yours truly. So you can see here that I have a folder with all of the three ones that I showed off beforehand. Specifically, I'm going to be doing a vanilla, so you select vanilla for the patch, as the XDelta files are the patches themselves. Then for source file, I'm going to quickly put this up here. You can see I have a demonstration folder here with just custom Robo in the US version specifically. I'm going to click on that and put that in as the source file, and then finally your output file. We'll do it again in the demonstration here. Like that. I can't remember. I specifically, what do you call it? My file names, I can change the kind of file they are by changing the end on the renaming. I don't know if XDelta sets it to ISO by default or not. If it doesn't, just be sure to append ISO to the end of it so it actually knows that it's a disk image. And once all of that is done, you press patch. This process should take a tiny bit. It partially depends on how big the patch itself is, whereas like other versions of vanilla are going to be a lot quicker than just vanilla to pardon me. Other versions to TE3 are going to be quicker than vanilla to TE3 just because there's less stuff to change, so vanilla will probably be the longest, but this process shouldn't really take more than a minute at most. As you can see, file patch successfully has come up, and then if we go into the demonstration folder here, there we go. You can see the Tournament Edition 3 ISO, same file size and everything, but exactly what we named it, etc., etc. So that's how you get your Tournament Edition ISO. Now I'm going to cover the Dolphin related parts of this. This section will quickly cover basically how to actually use the Dolphin UI and get your game set up. If you're already familiar with Dolphin, this will be superfluous to you, but just I want to make sure that everyone possible is accounted for, so we're going to go through this really quickly. So as you might notice, Dolphin could not find any GameCube Wii ISOs or WADs. Double click here to set a games directory. I'll just go to config here for right now. The same thing should basically happen where you select a folder if you double click here, but just for the sake of being able to set up paths whenever you want, I'll just show you exactly where to go. So you press config, it'll open up to general at first, but you can press paths to go back, and voila. Dump path, load path, you can see all of these down here, and then game folders will probably be empty by default when you start up your Dolphin, whereas all the others should autofill in. Now, for game folders specifically, you'll need to press add here, and then if we go to our demonstration folder from before, wherever that is, it'll say no items match your search, but that's because it's just looking for the folder, the one you're in specifically, but not actually any games. So if we do press select folder, boom. 2 custom Robo show up in the back, and there's going to be, like, if you want to put both of them in the same folder, there's a couple of ways to try and distinguish between them. Dolphin has a tagging system you might have noticed wasn't there previously. You can change that by going to the top here, and then there's a bunch of different options you can select. If I remove tag, it disappears. If I put tag back, there it is at the end. You can rearrange these in whatever way you want. This is probably just the easiest way I can think of. After you check both ISOs, whichever one you find to be the modded one, just create a tag by right-clicking on it, new tag, then you can view through here this menu and set it up. So that's a pretty easy way to distinguish between the two, but otherwise you might only just want to keep one ISO in the folder that you're using anyways. That's perfectly fine, and that honestly makes it even easier. But it's just important to distinguish between them, because if you try and host the wrong version when you're trying to do Netplay, or for whatever reason Dolphin identifies the wrong version when it's trying to connect to somebody, there will be problems. But this makes it a lot easier on you. So here I'll cover a lot of the specific Netplay components you'll need to do to actually play against people online. Specifically gecko codes and then the Netplay interface itself. Now, a very important thing that you'll need to do to your custom Robo that's fundamental to online play is set up the unified code. So what that is that there are gecko codes available on Dolphin, which are basically codes run by Dolphin itself while you're running a game that can change various things. You may be familiar with it in the context of action replay codes, AR codes up there, which, infinite lives, whatever you used to use as a kid and all of that type of thing. And gecko codes specifically are kind of similar. In regards to what they do for this game, the unified code itself changes a lot of settings that aren't easily done through actually editing the ISO. Specifically, it can turn on and off stage hazards based on an option in the menu. It automatically sets to 700 HP. It keeps what parts you're using, even if you're forced to exit to the title screen, which the game doesn't normally do. A lot of very useful things like that. So the unified code itself can be found over on the Discord. Go up here. Yeah. I would highly recommend downloading it. It's very hard to copy and paste the whole thing through the Discord itself, so download the unified code, and then if I pull it up here, you can see that I have the unified code. So the first thing is the unified code itself. At the bottom, it just shows the individual codes. So grab this and select it until you make it to individuals. Then Control-C for copy, or right-click if you're into that type of thing. And then add new code. Copy it right here, so Control-V for paste, or right-click. And then you can just name it whatever. I recommend unified code. I'm not going to save it, but hit save because I already have it put up right here. And then by default, I believe it will be off. Make sure it's ticked on before you play. It's pretty obvious. You'll have your HP set to 700 by default in any mode where you're playing as a human player, aside from maybe the story mode, I think. So you can just go into arcade mode or versus real quick to test out if it's working. And if it is, that works out. Also, I believe if you go into the options with this code selected, you will see illegal stages as an option, whereas that's not there by default. So that should show you basically the number one fundamental thing for playing online. Otherwise, to quickly give you an overview of the Netplay interface, when you want to host something, right-click on it, go down to Host with Netplay, and then the window will be pulled up right here. So I'll just give you a rundown of what everything here is. Actually, quickly going to go back, start Netplay. So there's two types of Netplay with Dolphin: direct connection, which is IP address type stuff. You don't necessarily need to worry about it. Feel free to go into that if you want, but I won't actually cover it here, just because traversal server is generally more useful for the average person and a lot less demanding. So host right here, and you'll see a code right here, even with a button to copy it to your clipboard. And as you might have noticed, if we go back, the connect just has a host code, which is exactly that number you just saw me copy. So if I put it back in here, and then I were to press connect, I'd connect to whoever was actually having this code like I did a second ago, but it'll just generate a new one when I go in again. As for settings you need to concern yourselves with, sometimes you'll need to swap what port people are on. You can do that right here. It's fairly intuitive. Just make sure you're not assuming. And you can also determine the buffer here. Now, the rule of thumb that we've chosen to go through is one buffer for every 12 ping. Your own ping will basically remain at 0 the whole time, so you want to look at what your opponent has, or collectively kind of add up everyone else playing if you have 3 or 4 people. But generally, that 12 rule of thumb should be fine in the 1v1s, which is probably the way you'll be playing this game the most. But what buffer does is it basically holds off inputs for a second in order to accommodate for some lag spikes. Otherwise, you're going to be, even in decent connections, you'll be suffering from a lot of delay. Because unfortunately, we are not a rollback game, as you might have guessed from the Dolphin Netplay. Though, buffer does a decent enough job, especially at low connections, of accounting for that type of thing. As a rule of thumb, though, if it's not above 12 already, on top of what do you call it? For every 12 on top of that, if your buffer isn't below 12, continue raising it until it feels good. Around buffer 12 is where inputs really start to get delayed automatically, because buffer just kind of overall delays your inputs a decent amount, and it's kind of tolerable up until that degree, but if it goes above 12, it's starting to get very bad, and the connection might just have issues at that point. But for most people, hopefully, that won't necessarily come to that. You should average around 6 to 8 buffer against people who are pretty decent in that regard. So nothing to worry about there. As a quick aside to the previous Netplay section, I'll talk about memory cards real quick. Again, if you go into GameCube here, right next to the paths, you can find device settings, and then this is basically what's inserted into each slot. Now, you don't really need to concern yourself with it. In fact, it's preferred if you're playing online that you have it set to nothing, but there won't be like disastrous results if you do have a memory card plugged in. It's just completely unnecessary because the unified code mentioned earlier unlocks everything and unlocks all the modes for you, so you won't really need to do it unless you're playing story mode on the side, in which case, yep, it selects through these raw files basically the memory card data, so nothing will be gone if you just take it off. You can just put memory card back in, and then through this, you can just put in whatever, double click on whatever you want it to, and then it'll basically be using that as the file path for your memory card. But again, if you just want to play online, just keep it on nothing. There will be no problems with it. And even if you want to practice by yourself, keeping it on nothing, you have access to basically everything you need to in the entire game. The last part of the setup I'll show you here is how to get the texture pack up and running properly. So firstly, it's on the Discord. We'll go right down to modding content again. The newest overall texture pack will probably be pinged right here and also kept in setup as well, same as the X Deltas. So if we go down here, you'll see that you can download the zip off the internet. And then, let's go to right here. And you'll see we have the demo folder once again. I made a smaller subfolder called texture within it, and you can see the zip and the actual folder. If we go inside, we'll see the T3 texture pack. just extract it as you would any other zip. In case you haven't already, you can right-click Extract All on pretty much any newer version of Windows, or you can go inside and literally copy the folder itself. Now, inside of the texture pack zip, you'll find Combined and Individuals. Individuals is pointless if you just want the whole thing. It just shows you what Robo skins are, what menu skins are, and all of that if you want to see the individual ones and like pick between them. But as for Combine, which is the main way you're going to install it, you'll see all of the textures are put in here. So you probably want to just either Control A or whatever. I'll just do Control A because it makes sense. And then copy. Now, you'll need to set up the path for your load properly. So you'll see down here, load path. That's where it gets custom textures and other types of custom stuff from for Dolphin. So right-click on that, and we'll see. It should have one automatically set up for you. I know it did for me at least. If not, then you'll just need to set a path. Whenever you right-click, you'll see Select Folder right here. But we can see Dolphin Emulator Load. So actually, we'll copy this instead for now. And pull up another Explorer. So here's our load folder. Go into Textures, and then GXCE01. That is Custom Robo. That will 100% be the folder. That might not be created by default, so be sure to create a folder and name it GXCE01. Now, if we go inside, you'll notice I already have it installed, but I'm just going to quickly delete it just to show you. Go back here, copy, and then paste. All of these will be in. So I'll show you what it actually looks like when it's in game in a moment, but as long as you set up the path properly, that should all work out for you. Here's another quick section where I'll basically show you like what the game looks like when everything is running properly. So we're going to go into our modded version right here. So you can see all of the textures working properly, basically shown by this immediately. So Robo Tournament Edition, press start, different main menu screen. And we'll go into arcade mode because this has probably the quickest way to test various things and get into the parts catalog. Just press normal, then you can go into the custom Robo here for a single screen. So, default Dureo 1, can't check the HP values here for the codes, so we'll go do that in a second. But as for parts, go back here, you'll see that Y-arm no longer has an illegal sign, and it actually has a different description from the way it was in vanilla. Likewise, if we go to bombs, here you can see Sky Blast, which is another G3 original part, Rapid. And go back here. All three of the Z-Boss illegals have their illegal times removed, and as you can see in the description, are basically different Robos. So that's a telltale sign that your ISO matching worked well, but how do we check about the code? Go into Versus here. Pardon me. The quickest way is, you might notice, illegal stages right here. Now, this was originally the first-person menu, or first-person setting, if I'm not mistaken, which is just automatically unlocked and replaced with the illegal stage option, considering it's kind of a weirdly superfluous setting because you can't use it in multiplayer in the first place. So, if they're off, go into Versus here, versus the AI in this match, you might notice the train is not moving, the conveyor belts are not moving, and a number of other stage hazards are completely frozen. Whereas if we go back and turn illegal stages on, not only is the stage selection back to its default way, but all the stage hazards should be working properly. You can go to Panic Cubes here, for instance, and wait for 5 seconds. Yep, so it's just like vanilla in this regard, whereas the other version, which is automatically set to, is more of the competitive version. So that's how you know that the codes are working, and lastly, if we go in there... may not have the 700 HP working properly. Funny. Although that might just only apply to PvP. Let's see. tag here. Yeah, everyone's HP is set to 700 by default. Tag is just the default way we play. 700 is specifically because with 2 collective robots worth of HP, you're a lot tankier in this mode than you would be in 1v1s. So if you just want to play like a 1v1 with a friend, 1000 HP should work fine. 700 is just the default rule set for this mode. But yeah, if you're seeing all of this in your game, it's all working out fine. You can also see the texture pack is running in the menus as well. I'll quickly show you. You can actually turn it off while it's running, so we can turn load custom textures off. Boom. You can see a lot more red, sort of gray work off, and go back to one of the modified stages. It's like a nature park. Turn it back on. Boom. Menu's a lot more in blue, and you can see the stage skins properly loaded. So all of those sections should basically mostly conclude what this video is about. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment or pop into the Discord yourself and ask me. I am Nasty Cactus on Discord, and I'll mostly be willing to reply even if it takes a bit. And as for any other common questions, there is a bug we've noticed that happens to like very rarely a couple of people, and it's not even like consistent in who it affects, but sometimes they just can't seem to connect to each other when they're playing. This is what we're going to call the host-only bug, where someone literally can't connect to other rooms, but people can connect to their rooms, and sometimes they can even connect to specific other people. It's just like any online game where there's a very weird issue where people literally just can't play with each other and can't connect to each other for some particular reason that might be related to internet configuration. It's very hard for us to tell, but the host-only bug is incredibly rare, and it only has happened to like 3 people who just cannot connect to any other server. If that happens to you, we still don't entirely know what to do, but please contact us, and we'll see if we can try and find some way to accommodate it on the Discord, any of the staff members. And other than that, you may notice in the modding content that there are other gecko codes. They're all inserted the same way, although you'll only ever need the unified code for tournament. Anything else will be communicated ahead of time, hopefully. All of the other ones basically just modify individual aspects of the game. Like you can see I have a widescreen and a music off code right here if I want those for whatever reason. All of those can be found around the Discord, and they're inserted the exact same way as that one. None of them are mandatory to play online. And on that note, it's also worth telling you that the host settings, when it comes to these types of things, will overwrite. So you don't need to unify memory codes, because if the host has a memory code, memory card in, everyone will get unified to the host's memory. And likewise, if the host has whatever code on, it'll automatically make sure everyone else is basically affected in the same way by that code. So you technically don't even need to have the code if you're playing with a host who does, but it's highly important in the event that you do need to host that I show you how to do it. So, that should be everything. Yep. Enjoy the Robo battles.